Hi, welcome back. AT here. Thank you for tuning in to Ludus. Today I'm talking to Luke Baden. Luke is a master trainer at the well-renowned gym Third Space. He's also a Strong First elite coach and CrossFit Level 2. He is also by far one of the coolest guys I know. And I think if you take in even half of what Luke puts out during this chat, you'll be well on your way to optimizing both your training and your journey as a coach. So let's get stuck in. Hello, and welcome to Ludus, where we're in search of the philosophies, principles, and practices of the miraculously successful. Here we will endeavour to identify, unpack, and discuss the actions, habits, and ethos of fiercely successful human beings in an attempt to create clear, actionable advice for you to implement and experiment with on your own journey of self-improvement.
You can begin to feel your own existence as absolutely fundamental.
You got a dream, you got to protect it. Don't ever let somebody tell you you can't do something.
Better, stronger, faster.
Hi Luke, how you getting on, mate?
Good fella, how are you? Sun's out, feeling good. How are you?
Yes. I'm glad it's made a return. It was looking like we were going to be a bit miserable for a bit there. I will say this: I think this lockdown would be a little bit different if it was happening in October. People's reactions might be a little bit different.
Would have been a bit easier, wouldn't it?
Yeah. All of the you can get out for an hour a day of exercise might not have been received so well.
Yeah.
It wasn't like 25 degrees when they were saying it.
Yeah.
Okay, so Luke, let's just get stuck straight in.
Cool.
First, we want to talk to you about is your philosophy on training. So, kind of, what's your overarching approach and mindset to training? Is there something about your practice that you kind of think's unique? Your approach, kind of how I think everyone's approach is unique, but what's your philosophy in particular?
I think this comes down to the balance between being a pragmatist and being a purist. And I'm someone who bill myself as an ultimate pragmatist. So I like to learn a lot. I like to go out there, especially in the fitness industry. I like to learn, but just take what I need from that rather than, I think there's a lot of like people uncover something. It's awesome to learn something that it makes sense to them. So then suddenly they have to kind of be assimilated into that dogma, whatever it is, powerlifting or CrossFit or whatever. And then that's it. They have to hold rigid to that line and kind of, they have to take all the negatives of those protocols or whatever comes with that training system. And they have to feel like they have to defend it because of the journey that they've had, which has been overwhelmingly positive. Whereas me personally, I'm like, I went off and did my CrossFit level 1, level 2, and I'm like, I really like these bits, so I'm going to keep them. I'm not sure about those bits, and I'll ask a few pertinent, maybe a bit annoying questions on the workshop, and if you can't answer it, then I'm not going to disregard the whole format, but I'm just going to disregard those bits. Same with, I've done multiple Strong First qualifications, which is a kind of a gold standard kettlebell qualification. And even there, you'll see on my Instagram bio is like elite Strong First instructor, which is something I'm very proud of. But there are certain things that come up during the workshops where kind of like, I'm not sure that they know the science behind that. It's kind of a bit anecdotal. And if they say it's anecdotal, then I'll be like, okay, cool. I'll give it a go. But if you sort of pass it off as science, but you can't really tell me, where's the literature on that, then maybe I just not keep that bit, but it doesn't mean I have to dismiss everything. So I think as you asked to come back to it is, you've got tools in a toolbox and you bring out a tool when you need it and you put it back when you don't. You don't have to kind of belong and become that tool. You just pick it up when you need it and you put it down when you don't need it. You find something better, you pick that up and you use that. You don't have to get sentimental about what you used in the past. So that really helps me in terms of this sort of hypocrisy and being a bit of a hypocrite is something I can't really abide in myself and in other people. And I think what happens when you get assimilated by a certain dogma is that suddenly something changes. A global pandemic, for instance, and the world's turned on its head, and then you have to be a very, very strong, single-minded person to stick to your guns. And a lot of people don't. And then you do end up looking a bit silly when you for a year you've gone, yeah, burpees suck, burpees are stupid. Oh, people doing burpees, you need landmine presses. Oh, no one can get access to a gym. Give it a few weeks and suddenly you're posting, body weight hit workouts or whatever. So I think personally, if you're ultimate pragmatist and you say that, I say that in meetings and in arguments I've had at my work and stuff, is that, if you pick something up and it uses it, I'll use it. If I pick it up and it doesn't work, I'm not going to use it. No matter what affections we have for that thing, everything needs to be useful. Otherwise, there's no point carrying it, I would say.
Right. It's interesting, the anecdote you used there about the tools in the toolbox. And I think the people who get too bogged down in a dogma and too consumed in kind of identifying with whatever their practice is that eventually they've only got one tool. And there's a saying that everything looks like a nail to a hammer. And in a way that's fine when it's just you. If it's just you, if you're just the power lifter, then that's absolutely fantastic. But when you buy into that identity so much as a professional, and everything, as we say, is a nail to a hammer, eventually you're going to do some damage. There's very much the risk of that, be that to a client or your ego. And it's interesting the point you brought up as well. Just to date this recording a little bit, obviously we're during the COVID-19 lockdown, and the people before who were very dismissive of quote unquote HIIT workouts and body weight workouts, and in some ways any sort of kind of cross training, anything that doesn't fit their mold, they're kind of the people now who don't have the depth of experience to be helping, or be, whether that be producing content or whether that be helping their clients, because they're, as you say, they're so quick to discount anything that doesn't fit their mold. They then only see the surface, and it is easy to look and see kind of the crap floating around, sure, but if you've never bothered to delve and look for some substance in that, then all you're going to be left with is kind of understanding the stuff you've been knocking for however long, which is incredibly detrimental. And like you say, you take what's useful, disregard what isn't, but you don't lose it as such, do you? Because what works for you.
No, and that's a really good point. I think you're coming around to something that I would say is that there's multiple routes to the same destination, so it's like sometimes they're not optimum, but sometimes it's nice to take the scenic route because you might learn something else. Do you know what I mean? To get strong, there's multiple routes to that. There's, like I said, I've done the strong first stuff, but also there's powerlifting, there's assisted raw powerlifting. There's millions of different routes to strong. And just because you think one is optimum doesn't mean that you just have to reject everything else. It can be sometimes it's nice to take the scenic route and do it another way, because they all lead to the same destination, and they wouldn't exist and people wouldn't know about them if they didn't work as well. This is kind of a thing of you want to get strong, powerlifting works. That's why it still exists and we know what it is. You want to get strong and move quickly. Kettlebells works. That's why they're still here. People making them, making a business out of selling them. It's there's multiple routes to the same destination, and that's okay. And just because you think one is optimum doesn't mean that you just need to burn all the others. You can chop and change if you want to.
Yeah, of course.
Or when you need to, when a global pandemic strikes.
Exactly. You need, having those tools in your toolbox is it's never, it's a metaphorical toolbox, so it's not going to get too heavy, is it? You can carry those tools for as long as you like, and then especially as a professional, you're going to come up against occasionally a client who one of those tools is actually apt for. And if you're the person who spends their entire life knocking intermittent fasting, for instance, the first time you get a client that says, I just don't like to eat in the morning, what are you going to do? You're going to force a square peg for a round hole, or are you going to
Yeah.
empathize and listen and go, well, actually, here's this other technique that sounds like it might be fantastic for you and still work within the framework of my belief. So in terms of where you're at now, so you've spent obviously years and years and years as a pragmatist, and
Yeah.
you've clocked up thousands of hours of your own training and training others and training in a group setting, which I would argue kind of multiplies the amount of people, the amount of experience you've got, simply because you have to make it work for so many people. What are
Yeah.
the kind
Yeah.
of principles that you're at the moment that you're working with in your own training, and where it's kind of applicable in the training you're doing with people, that you're finding to be most effective for you, for your goals at the moment?
One of my sort of principles is that you training is a practice. That's a big thing for me, is if you can understand it in terms of a practice, then we suddenly start to see that sometimes all we need is more practice. So of course you want your 45 minutes, 60 minutes sweat session, burn calories, moving around, jumping around, whatever. You have that, but it's also part of a bigger practice. And if you can start to see that, then suddenly you start to see that a lot of strength or a lot of movement is actually just down to having more practice. And it's okay to practice outside of your training session that day or that week. So big sort of principle for me is getting people to, outside of their actual training, to practice technique, either low load compared to what they're used to, or no load. And I think some of the stuff you've seen with me putting on Instagram is actually breaking movements down, reverse engineering those movements. Let's look at a devil's press. Okay, your technique can always be better. Your technique can always benefit from work. Let's reverse engineer that. Let's break it into its pieces. Let's practice each piece outside of your regular training, so you're not worried about, oh, I'm not sweating while I'm doing this, or I'm not out of breath, or it's not really heavy, so I'm not going to get any stronger. Let's break it down. Let's practice the parts. Let's put the parts back together slowly, or maybe quick if you're doing really well, and then let's chain it together, and then let's practice it with a low load and make it look amazing. Because if you can make it look amazing with the 10 kilo dumbbells, guess what? How it looks like with the 22.5s when you're doing a CrossFit competition or whatever is going to look pretty good as well, because it's going to translate. So a big principle for me is that you can practice this stuff outside of your actual training session, and that will really benefit your actual training. In Strong First, we have the 6 foundational movements of kettlebells, and when you go to to become a certified instructor, it's kind of a harrowing 3-day event that culminates in a conditioning test, which we'll probably talk about at some point, but also technique tests. And do you know what? There's nothing better for your technique than knowing that you're going to have to step up in a silent CrossFit box, completely silent CrossFit box, with a judge facing you with a clipboard. And you're going to have to get up. You're going to have to do 10 single arm swings on your right hand, park the bell with composure, set up properly, and do 10 swings on the left hand. Within that 3 days, your technique goes from, yes, it's a pretty good technique, to like, this is now like laser focus, almost like the equivalent of, in karate when they do a kata and every movement is kind of measured.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff, that actually builds capacity way more than people think. Dialing in on the technique outside of your actual training builds capacity way, way more than people think. And that's a big principle for me.
Would you say that kind of, to quote Pavel, that kind of grease in the groove training, would you say that's something that's massively missing from a lot of people's training?
100%. I mean, grease in the groove is a little bit more it's very similar to the sort of my take on that. Greasing the groove, you know, is multiple sets in a day that are sub-maximal, and it works, especially for things like pull-ups and stuff. But in terms of kettlebells and dumbbells and barbells, I'm not really a barbell guy, but as I understand from barbells, there's so much more benefit to cycling those things at a low weight, mindfully. Like, you're not thinking about the destination. When we exercise normally, we're thinking about the destination, like how fast can we finish Fran? You know, how much of a hole can we put ourselves into? How quickly can we transition from the air bike to whatever? Or like, when will this 20-second Tabata be done, or whatever? But practicing cycling stuff at a light weight and not thinking about the destination, which is, I need to practice cycling this for 10 rounds because my program says so, but rather getting in there and mindfully being in your body and observing, filming yourself is also good. Not so much the mirror, because obviously we know now how much mirrors can actually put you off when you're trying to actually look at yourself at the same time as do the movement. But yeah, I would say this kind of takes Grease the Groove just a little bit further, where Grease the Groove is quite regimented and we're looking to elicit that kind of like strength effect. This is more just like, if you can make what you're doing with in my instance, the kettlebell, if you can make that look amazing, like with a 16 kilo, like to the point where you're doing simple complexes, but people like kind of like, it's almost like a bit of poetry to them as they walk past, then when you get on the 32s, you're really gonna benefit from that movement, that the efficiency of movement, you know. And of course, there's going to be that Grease the Groove effect in there as well on the nervous system. Yeah, I don't know if I answered your question then.
No, 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 perfectly, perfectly. I liked that. I like the distinction there, and that actually, as you're explaining it, it made sense to me. In that Grease the Groove is probably more of a training tool, where what you're talking about is a practice tool, but it's going to have the same effect in, as you're saying, creating that sort of mindful connection with the movement.
Yeah.
Which I think, and that is another thing I would ask you, do you think that's something that's kind of looking at the two courses you mentioned there? Obviously, you're overly qualified, but you've gone down the SFG route, the Strong First route, and also you're CrossFit level 2. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah.
And how do those and kind of from what you're explaining, where I can see your principles sit so nicely in the middle from my point of view.
Yeah.
How do you find that? Because Strong First is notorious for, as you're saying, you have to demo kind of expert skill, right? With this one tool.
Yeah.
Whereas kettlebell, whereas CrossFit, not so much when you're doing your CrossFit level 1 or CrossFit level 2, but as a sport, and by extension, as a sort of training methodology, you've almost got the opposite. Whereas, like you're saying, you're just trying to get to the end of the journey,
get it done.
Yeah. Do you think, in your practice, do you think you've benefited from both of them ideals? Do you think one carries over to the other?
Yeah. I think if anyone's listening to this and they're like, what's Strong First? Because I'm pretty sure everyone will know what CrossFit is, but what Strong First is like, if you are a fitness professional and you're kind of looking for where you want to find your niche, or you want to learn more, like, it's amazing. Like, I've done every single instructor course that they've done, so that gives me a rank of elite instructor. And I didn't do that to say I'm an elite instructor. I did it because the first one were like, this is amazing, when's the next one? And I did those in a year, because I did the whole thing in a year, like 6 or 7 courses, 1,500 quid a pop or whatever, just because they were amazing. But I always take what people say and I'll be like, I'm going to take it with a pinch of salt. And these bits that you said were awesome, but these bits, like, not so much. And that came to me when, but that's okay. It's all right to feel that way. I feel like sometimes we feel like we've got to buy into the whole thing or not at all. And the stuff I learned on Strong First was like, if you dial in on technique, you sort of hack strength. That it's a hack of the body to dial in with such laser focus that you become stronger. Even in and a lot of it is anecdotal, and that's okay. It is like, there's certain tricks when you're doing a kettlebell overhead press. There's certain tricks that you do with what we call the soft side, so the side that's not working, and you can actually transfer a lot of the effort to the soft side to make the hard side, the working side, stronger in the moment. So you can say to someone, press this, and they can't do it, and then you go, try it again, but do X, Y, and Z, and they suddenly become stronger. The nervous system hasn't improved. It's just they've improved the functioning in that moment of their nervous system. And that stuff was amazing. But then we come to the snatch test, which is the conditioning element of Strong First. And the CrossFitter, who I've been labeled as on the course, he's the CrossFitter. He came on with Metcons on the day one. We're all barefoot, and you're like stupid for wearing those or whatever. It's like, the CrossFitter did the snatch in 3 minutes 30, and like we're all like on the floor dying, and he's like, okay, now what we're doing, So it's like you've got to sometimes take on board what people are saying. Like, I really like when I watch you move, you look amazing, but when we did that snatch test, you were struggling. So like some of the stuff I learned from CrossFit about, learning how to put yourself in a hole, building up capacity in that kind of dark place, like you could potentially benefit from a lot of that. And I'm fine with that. I'm cool with that. I'm cool with, I think on Joe Rogan, Joe asks Pavel about CrossFit, and he sort of, if you go on YouTube, he famously asks for like a break at that moment in the interview, because you can tell he's kind of, he's like blood is boiling. He wants to. A part of a principle of Strong First is that you need to be a quiet professional and not deriding other people, and he needs to give himself a moment to kind of like not just unleash hell on what he thinks of that. But I really like, I'll take all that technique stuff. I'll take some of the stuff they do on how to build capacity and how to develop a resistance to lactic acid. That stuff is amazing, but you're not going to tell me to not do Fran or to whatever, Andrew Tracy puts up like a log. Is it Cindy with a log? I want to have a go at that. And you're not going to tell me like that's dangerous. It's like, it's not. It's cool. I want to have a go.
Right. And
I think that's fine.
That's kind of the other side of the dogmatic approach, isn't it? Is the amount of kind of enjoyment you're precluding yourself from by not being able to try other stuff. Yeah, for sure.
You follow those guys on. You follow those guys on Instagram, you become part of a brotherhood when you do the Strong First stuff, and you end up following all these people, and they're kind of like, there's this minimalist thing, which I know you like, you kind of, why make things overcomplicated and blah, blah, blah. But at some point, it's like, it become endurance to them. How boring can I make it to show how committed I am? And it's like, okay, I'm going to do a complex, it's just like, that's cool and interesting. And it's, I'm sick of doing, 10 swings on my right, 10 swings on my left, followed by 10 Turkish get-ups. Like I need to do something a bit different, and that's all right. You don't have to turn it into endurance to prove how committed you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that there's an element sometimes of A, obviously tribalism, and B, people can kind of hide behind their modality of choice, if that makes sense?
Yeah, big time. You belong to the club, right? You go in, you belong to the club, and then that's you get that. In this time, I've been reading a lot of the like self-help books and stuff, and I'm sure you will have read it, the Atomic Habits by James Clear. He kind of talks about, our most base biological drivers haven't changed since we were cavemen. There's like, let's procreate, feed me, keep me safe, and belong into the tribe, and that's it. That's why Instagram, you put something up, and if no one liked it, you would be upset. And it's not it's not that thing that it's irritating you. It's the fact that you have a key, you know, ancient biological driver that says, I want to belong to the tribe. I want to be validated. And you know, those likes tell me that I am. And that's massive. You know, it's massive in CrossFit, right? And it's okay. But I think at some point you reach a level of maturity, or maybe it's just people like me and you who are kind of a bit rebellious or lone wolf sometimes, and be like, you know, I'd rather create my own ethos based on what I've seen and done, rather than just buy in wholeheartedly to yours. If that
Yeah,
makes sense, because
yeah,
I can always
100%.
add and retract to my ethos, to my religion, but I can't add and retract to yours. You know,
Yeah,
I can't tell Pavel what we need to take out of the strong first literature, but my literature in my head, you know, I can, at any point, I can just set fire to that. I can burn the whole temple down and create a new religion if I want to, like, and that's all right. But I think some people never see past this feeling of, oh, I belong. I'm part of the crew. I got the black T-shirt.
yeah,
Yeah,
very much so. And I think even sometimes when principles and practices don't start to bear out in people's own experience, they still hold on to it for a very long time.
yeah,
In which case,
yeah,
dogma can become very toxic. Uh, yeah, yeah, and I really like that. I really like that the kind of the split route you discussed there, and coming straight up the middle. I know obviously there's way more to you and to your experience and to your training than strong first and CrossFit, but I think having that strong first stuff in the bag, so that for you as a coach, when you're
yeah,
coaching someone through a metcon, that you have the depth of experience to be able to say, you know, squeeze your left hand, switch everything on, create that tension,
yeah,
and it's going to immediately affect someone's ability to do that. Metcon is huge. And it's not to say these coaching cues don't exist in CrossFit, but the more
yeah,
tools you can put in
yeah,
your toolbox, the better. And on the other side, on the converse of that, you don't use, kettlebells to you, although they might, from my point of view, they might be your primary tool. They're not your personality, are
yeah,
they?
yeah. And that's the thing, is that it's with the kettlebell, it's the best thing I have right now. And if tomorrow you create something and you show it me, and it's like this new thing, and we have a go at it and it's better, then I'll use that, and my kettlebells will gather dust. It doesn't need to be, you know, it doesn't need to be, like you say, I don't need to derive any of my identity from it. It's just a tool. Pick it up, use it. Is it working for me? Yes. Boom. Keep it. You know, it was good what you were saying a minute ago about getting caught up in a dogma. And I don't know if you had this journey as well, but I really had the journey of, like, you know, 20 years ago. What am I now? Yeah, even further. But, like, you know, wanting to look like a guy in a magazine when you're sort of like 10, 11. How do I look like that? And it's like, okay, so it's the 90s, right, for us too. And it's like, oh, well, it's like, you know, bicep curls and lat pull downs and this and that. And you know, I went off and did all that. And I'm 5'6", and right now I'm 80 kilos. And I went off and did all that, and I became like 96, 97 kilos, and I had no neck, and my back was in pain all the time. And then my colleagues would be like, "Hey, we're doing a Spartan race," and the first thing I'm saying is, "Oh, well, it's not part of the program."
Yeah.
But then you go and do it, and like I couldn't even hang off the monkey bars because I was so heavy, and I started to really get, like you say, a bit of like identity crisis of like, wait a minute, that kid who got into that, who wanted to look like Arnie or whatever, I've become this like lump that has back pain all the time. And when it actually comes to doing something fitness, like a Spartan race or whatever it was, I can't even do it. So it's like, what am I getting from this? And I had a real moment in my mid-20s where I'm like, this is not working. What am I going to do now? And it was kind of like CrossFit was around, but it was like this weird, you know, it's just like that first couple of years in the UK where it was like really misunderstood, and people were like, what's this weird cult? And it
Yeah.
took me a while to kind of pick up on that and be like, okay, yeah, what I really want to be is fit as a fiddle and actually quite lean, rather than just like this mass monster. that looks good for like, a week, a year, when he's like starved himself. Uh, so yeah, it's that getting caught up in that dogma. You give yourself this, anxiety or upset when it doesn't work out.
Yeah, and I think there's this idea that you kind of perpetuate in your head as well, that you're spending all of your time in the gym. So
Yeah,
you're a strong
yeah,
guy, right? I'm a strong guy.
yeah,
I'm a fit guy, and all of these words, they don't actually necessarily mean the same thing.
yeah,
And I had exactly the same thing as you. Uh, I would do nothing but bodybuilding style training, and somehow in my head, and this is going back, way back as
yeah,
well, somehow in my head that conflated to being fit. Well,
yeah,
I work in
yeah,
a gym, but I'm training for an hour and a half every single day, so I must be fit. And then I lost a running race to my younger brother, like, weird story,
yeah,
but
yeah,
I'd realized that
and you,
I'm about 5 minutes in. I'm like, I haven't run in a very long, like, how would I let myself get to the point where I was kidding myself that I was fit, or I was strong, or
yeah.
I was all of these things, when actually I was probably just one of them or another of them. And that's the danger of dogma, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, and that's a coming back to what we are talking about earlier. That's the great freedom I found in CrossFit as well. Is that, when you do things like bodybuilding, whatever, you're chasing one metric,
Yeah.
which is to look good. All right, and every other metric has to suffer. You have to, potentially have to feel quite bad. You have to, not be able to win a run against your brother.
Yeah.
You have to, feel sluggish going up the stairs. You have to spend a lot of money on food. And then suddenly it somehow makes you more insecure. You're doing it because you want to feel secure and look good. But somehow you end up more insecure because you suddenly realize, because you chase this one metric, how much other stuff you're like suck at. And that's what I thought is a great freedom in CrossFit, is to be like, so I suck at rowing, but I'll beat you on the butterfly pull-ups or whatever. It's like you have your unique skill, your spider web, and you can just expand it, and you just spreading multiple things out. And so 19.1 is rowing and wall balls. I did crap, but it's like, that's okay, because it's not that I'm unfit or bad or useless. It's just that workout didn't play to my strengths, but then the next one did. And you don't have to get so hung up anymore in like this one metric that you're chasing, and then all the other metrics that are suffering. Which I found one of the greatest things about CrossFit. I think it suddenly takes the heartache out of realizing you're actually quite average at a lot of stuff.
Yeah, no doubt, because across the board you
Yeah,
can be good. And I think a lot of the time as well, we're talking like very slim percentages. So when someone like you says, I'm not great at this, that's kind of within our community, right? That's kind
yeah,
of
yeah, yeah,
within, and you're
yeah,
still, the level of fitness that you're at, we get sucked into this kind of echo chamber, don't we? Or this bubble, I'd say, if we're surrounding ourselves with, we're surrounding ourselves with,
yeah. Big fish.
exactly, yeah, not even necessarily big fish, just everybody. And in particularly in CrossFit, when, as you say, there's such a variation of metrics to measure, then you're going to see the people who have got the 6-minute 2K road time.
Yeah,
But you spread that out across the whole world, and how many people are there with an 8-minute 2K road time? It's not very many,
yeah,
really, is it? Yeah. And I can
yeah,
definitely see how, kind of going back to what you were saying about getting insecure, it can kind of then push you even further down that path, because you have to justify, you now need to be
yeah. The commitment. You sort of,
yes,
yeah.
you've got to
You're
be
in
the
a
best
process of
version.
not wanting to cut your losses, right? You kind of,
Exactly, yeah.
and that's where I had that sort of 3-6 months maybe, where you're like, but I've come this far, I've
Yeah,
committed this much. How can I still look this bad and be this unfit?
yeah.
But like, look at how much I've done. Look at all this programming behind me. Like,
Mhm.
am I just going to let all that go? And at some point, you're like, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that
That's it.
actually that circles back around really nicely to how we were kind of talking about, people who go down the path of one training methodology to the point where they have excluded every other one, it's because they're so invested in their one thing.
Yeah.
They're then not willing to see how, by using this other tool, I might actually be able to get more usage for myself than if I just stay dogmatic. And that's what I really like about you is, as I said before, clearly the kettlebell is your tool, but it's not your personality. It's not your you don't kind of hinge your entire life on the fact that you're a kettlebell guy. And especially, I think we're seeing that particularly now. There's no reason to exclude anything, because eventually you're going to come up against something that the tools in your toolbox can't fix. And that's kind of what I really like about your principles there of kind of, it's like the old Bruce Lee adage, isn't it? Take what's useful, disregard the rest. And I think we've kind of gone another step in saying you don't necessarily need to disregard it. It just might not be of any use to you at the moment.
Right now.
Which I think is great. So in terms of your practices personally at the moment, the kind of real nuts and bolts of your training, your kind of daily workouts, rituals, regimes, the things you implement and rely on to keep your tools sharp. Could you just talk us through those a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, we're going back now to what we talked a little bit about in this sort of laser focus when it comes to technique, and understanding that capacity, or work capacity, can be developed outside of your actual training. So for me, I'm unlike you, I'm an endomorph, I would say, if that stuff still exists, but I'm someone who tends to eat too much and my body wants to hold on to what I eat. So I do need that, Metcon, or I feel like I need that Metcon or that training most days, 5 days a week or whatever. So that's set. And then aside from that, like work capacity, especially things like grip and ability to move explosively, is built as well in this kind of in this practice that is mindful and is outside of your actual training, and it never comes to a point where it is training, like exercise, like where you're fully sweating, you can't hold a conversation. It never gets to that point. And so I say that, and this is just anecdotal, and I'll completely admit that it's anecdotal, but what you've got to understand is that in my day-to-day job, like you said earlier, I teach group exercise, and I've done that for many years. And what I started to realize after about 4 or 5 years is that my demos of exercises are fucking awesome, but it's because I do them every day, 5 days a week. Think about it. 100 odd classes a month is 100 practices with very small load in front of a big group of people to make it look great, because we've got to inspire them but also educate them on how you want the movement to look. That adds up. And I started to realize actually that maybe I go into that a bit more and do that even more, like bring it on. And especially now that the lockdown is that every day there is some practice, which is not exercise. The exercise is set, that's in there, right? And then outside of that, there's low load or even no load practice. And there is such benefit to that, to stay mindful, to have laser focus towards it, but to never get to the point where it's becoming exercise, because at that point you've missed the point. So that's one thing that I really taken up, is like, working with people like, oh, I can't dumbbell snatch or whatever. I was like, okay, well, when was the last time you filmed yourself doing a dumbbell snatch without the weight in slow motion? Like, it's like, I think dancers are great at this. They're great at watching someone and then kind of teaching themselves how to look great doing that thing, even though they're not a discus thrower, but they can watch a discus thrower over and over and over again, and then practice it and practice it and practice it. And then in the end, they actually fool you to thinking they're a discus thrower. And actually, like, if you make a movement look amazing, that's pretty close to actually you just been great at that movement now. Um, I think that's really missed by people is that, and I learned this more on if you've ever seen anyone do. I've done the animal flow courses, and they're it's not 100% my thing in terms of I don't practice it. But what I got from it is how to practice, which is like you know you see the guys there, some of the guys on the course, Mike Fitch, who created it. It's like, he demos something and the whole room goes quiet. There's this like hush, and he does, a side kick through with a handstand in the middle, and everyone's like, whoa. And it's like, I realized that if you want to build capacity, you actually have to practice these things outside of the time when you're officially building capacity, and that time is never wasted if you're really into this. If you're kind of geeks like me and you are, then that time is never wasted. With that, so as a side to that is that making something look amazing is going to hinge on your ability to get into those positions, right? If you can't overhead squat, then chances are your barbell snatch is not going to look picture perfect no matter how much practice you do. So for me, again, mobility work or restorative yoga is a daily pursuit as well. Even just 20-30 minutes to decompress at the end of the day is not wasted time, because you're actually slowly over time going to access a bit more range, and then your movement is going to look a bit better, and then your practice of those movements is going to look a bit better, and then lo and behold, you can do a WOD and it costs you less energy because you're moving like a ninja.
Yeah, I think that kind of there's going to be, we're massively into this, and for us it's kind of a journey of exploration, right? So we are experimenting in how does X affect Y, and I think for kind of Joe Public, for a lot of people, there's the idea that this is all too much, right? So this is all too much time. Whereas, would you kind of see it as you're actually giving yourself better ingredients to work with in the long run? So the purposeful practice you're doing there, and I really like that dancer analogy. That's kind of how I was thinking about it earlier, that moving around without a partner or without a weight in this case. Do you think taking the time to foster that sort of precise motor control and just knowing these movements, even with your eyes closed in the dark with no implements, do you think that the carryover to your everyday training, your regular training, is then, to such a point that it completely makes this worth it? Like the payoff is
well, that all balances, hinges on, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? If someone, if exercise is a chore and it is a burden to you, then improving your Fran time is neither here nor there. You just want to do the thing to get the reward of, oh, I felt like I exercised today. But if you are someone who is, but those people as well, it's doomed to failure, right? Because if it is a chore, then you avoid chores. It's in our nature to avoid those things. Whereas I think a good thing I noticed with Strong First is when I can watch someone doing kettlebell swings now, and I can kind of tell you within 2 or 3 reps, probably within the setup, if that person knows anything about Strong First. And that for me is like, it's pretty cool, but also it shows how important that stuff is to those type of people. No one does the course, right? No one does the course and then doesn't start implementing it. There's no one who like used to be a Strong First trainer. It's kind of like you do it and you're like, even if you, like myself, you only take bits of it, you will always do swings that way now, because you've kind of gone through this like trial by fire, and your technique has just improved so much in that time. So, and I think that has a great merit, because if we're gonna, you might as well do what you're going to do in the time you have to the best of your ability. Otherwise, you might as well just play Xbox. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, just like take it easy. If you're not in it, then just don't be in it. Don't. There's no point in being half in something. I think there's a lot of that. You know, people's focus is their job or whatever, and they just exercise is the hour that they have to plug in each day, and hopefully that then they will live a bit longer. But if you don't identify and you don't believe in the journey that you're on, then you are just going to kind of, it's just going to be futile in the end. And I think our industry is maybe guilty of maybe leading people to believe that it is like a vending machine. You come
Yeah.
in, you put your 50p in, you get your can of Coke, or you come in, you pay your trainer 50 quid, you do your session, and in 3 years you'll be healthy or whatever. It's like, no, you actually have to be invested in this yourself as well.
Yeah, yeah, and obviously there are people for whom they're just looking to kind of withdraw the kind of minimal effective dose and get the kind of physiological response that you can get from just 7 minutes of anything intense every day.
Yeah,
But I think a lot of those people do end up leveling up, and then they kind of get caught
yeah,
floundering in that
yeah,
kind of area you're saying about there, where you're still stuck in the belief that it's as easy as you just pop your money in a vending machine and out it comes. But at the same time, they want to take it further. And I would, from listening to you speak there, kind of how I'm rationalizing it in my head is those are the people that get caught up doing sets and sets and sets of junk volume.
yeah,
Because they're not invested in a process yet, but they have kind of seen what you can get out of it, and they fall into I'm just going to do more is better, or more
yeah,
intense, and I can see how the way I'm seeing it in my head is this kind of purposeful practice outside of your exercise that you're talking about eventually is going to lead to a lack of, or that there's no longer going to be the necessity for that junk volume. Does that sound right? I mean,
yeah, 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 yeah,
if you're
yeah,
absolutely nailing every rep, suddenly, Fran is a much more effective workout if you're getting
yeah,
45, you get 90 perfect reps in
yeah,
4 minutes rather than maybe 20 good ones and
yeah,
the rest. So I definitely think, as much as to some people it might seem like they want to roll all of their practice into like one nice little neat package and call it an hour of training, I don't actually think what you're suggesting is even that time consuming anyway, is it really? I mean, if you were to talk me
no,
through a day
no,
of
yeah,
practice for you now,
yeah.
um
It's it's 10 minutes here, it's 15 minutes there, it's 5 minutes somewhere else. It's not, you don't, like I said with the grease the groove thing, that can be a bit more regimented if you want it to be. It can be unregimented as well. But again, that's not very time consuming if you don't want it to be. You've got a pull-up bar nearby if you're doing it for pull-ups or whatever. But this is, twice, 3 times a day, 5 minutes. It's suddenly over the course of a year that's gonna add up, and you're not gonna notice that. Think of the hours we scroll on Instagram. Think of the hours we lose staring at laptops. It's very tiny in comparison to that, but it does add up in the end.
yeah, I would even argue, like, outside of time, wasted time on social media and whatnot, I would kind of argue that the principles and practices you're talking about there, the person who's doing a 60-minute incline walk every day on the treadmill, or
Yeah,
even
yeah, okay, yeah,
even just like some
yeah,
real trash volume training, then they could make up that, they could split up that time and spread it just as
yeah,
well with what you're suggesting. And then I would say, if you're looking at 20 minutes of practice, 20 minutes of metcon, and then 20 minutes of restorative measures,
yeah,
you're still only out at kind of an hour a day. Would you kind of
yeah,
agree with that? But
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I think it's that practice that you do that enables you to get that good quality work in over that 20 minutes.
yeah,
Because 20 minutes of, it's something we're seeing a lot of now, 20 minutes of kind of dancing around is not going to be as effective as someone who has kind of honed their craft. Would you agree? And it
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
move very well. And it doesn't necessarily have to mean doing very specific animal flow drills and whatnot, but someone who's good at a burpee is going to get more out of those burpees, right?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I really like that. Right. I've got some quick fire questions for you here, mate.
Cool. Yeah.
If you could make one book or piece of media compulsory reading or watching for either people new to the industry, training, or indeed everybody, what would
Yeah.
it be and for what reasons?
So I thought I would pay homage a bit to Pavel and Strong First in that at the moment I'm getting so many people in my DMs because everyone's everyone's in lockdown, and people are finding me on Instagram and they're wanting to know how do I get like you, how do I do this, how do I do that. For me, Simple and Sinister, which is a book by Pavel, I would just be like, my default answer to people is get this book, all right. Probably you need these weight bells, and then once you can do that, come back to me and you'll like unlock the next level. And it's a great, for me it's it's a small book. You can read it in a day if you want to. It's contained in it is a program that just builds a baseline capacity for kettlebells and strength, if that's what you want to do. All right, so most people who contact me, that's kind of what they're alluding to when they ask, oh, how do I get to your level? It's like, okay, this contained within this book, just read that. You need these bells, go do it, come back to me. If you do that every day, maximum 5 days a week or whatever, it will just build that work capacity. So I would say, yeah, Simple and Sinister by Pavel.
Wicked. And I think for those people we were talking about kind of just a minute ago who just want to plug in and get their minimal effective dose of Simple and Sinister, it's probably something that the average Joe is never going to come across, but it is potentially, if we lived in some kind of 1984 Orwellian world where everyone turned on the TV and had to train in front of it every morning to get their daily dose, Simple and Sinister. I mean, I could imagine Pavel actually giving that chat on the telly.
That would be it, right?
Definitely. Simple and Sinister. Love that. If you could go back in time and speak to yourself in the first year or a few years of your kind of training or your career as a trainer, what advice would you have for yourself?
I would say to myself that when you get paid, Luke, your first outgoing for the first 5 years is further education. I think that is what, and I found that a little bit later than the first few years, but I wish it would have been straight away, because you kind of, you invest your money and you do the PT course. That's quite expensive. Then you come out, and I did a few courses with Premier, like literally in the week after and a few months after. But then you feel like, oh, I'm PT, I've got a PT job. Here we go. But with courses, and especially if you find stuff that you like, don't force yourself to go on things you don't like. Find stuff you like, and that'll lead you down a rabbit hole of learning. You'll find more stuff. I found kettlebells through Premier because I didn't know what they were, and then I found Strong First from finding kettlebells. And you go on these rabbit holes. But with courses and good courses that you want to go on, you can literally buy gravitas. Like, you can buy gravitas in the industry, and because so many people in the industry aren't doing it, or don't want to do it, or they kind of want to do it, but they want to go to Ibiza this summer, so they don't want to spend the money. And it's like, if you want to be like really good, I think in the first few years in the industry, I thought, oh, I'm never going to be really good until I've got loads of experience. I wish, and because I went to university and I did philosophy, so I kind of started to feel like, oh, I should, if I really wanted to be the best trainer, I should have done, I should have done it at uni. I should have done sports science at uni, and And it's like, but actually, you get a few years in, I got 5-6 years in, and I was like, okay, now I need to start doing more courses again. And that just led to lots of rabbit holes, lots of learning, lots of courses. And I suddenly started to realize a few years later that people were kind of like turning to me and being like, what do you think? Like, suddenly I had like this like sort of Yoda type persona that I'd never thought to go and get. I just wanted to feel less insecure about my service, or wanted to feel like I always know what I'm going on about. And you suddenly realize that actually, past doing the PT course, a lot of the industry are then like, yeah, I'm good now. I spent my money. Now I just want to make money and that's it. But if you're really in it for the long haul, as I was then, and that's what I would say to myself, is like every time you get paid now, your first investment, pay your bills, and your first investment is education. And within a very small amount of time, you would have surpassed 90% of the industry in terms of what you know. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Right, because that kind of reps level 3 before you do it, it's kind of the pinnacle, isn't it? But then you realize it's a very low barrier, it's a very low bar to entry, and it should be treated as just a jumping off point. And like you say, people get into the idea that what they need to do is get experience, which obviously you 100% do. But if your experience is 20 hours of PT every single week, delivering the same service and never learning anything new, suddenly in 10 years time, the guy who's just come off of his premier course is as good a trainer as you. Obviously you've learned the empathy.
You're both just a guy in a t-shirt. Like, but people don't know you're both just a guy in a t-shirt, and that's it. With the word trainer written on your back. So yeah, it's just the experience will come. You don't have to get upset or insecure that you don't have experience. Because I don't know about you, but I definitely felt in the first few years that I was like bluffing it a little bit, like because
that imposter syndrome.
But it was like it's totally cool to be in that position if you're doing something about it every single month. It's a minute that you stop doing something about it and start thinking you know it all, because you did your level 3 or whatever. It's that, it's the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? But yeah, that's what I would do. That's what I would say.
100%. And I would say for any like PTs that are listening from personal experience, the other thing that continued education does is it buys you momentum, and you do everything. You're investing. You invest in yourself. You're spending time around coaches, and you feel like you are, whether it's making absolutely no financial difference other than costing you loads of money, you're very aware that you're investing in yourself and you're creating momentum and you're elevating yourself. And that's not kind of an egotistical thing,
it's just a really noble pursuit, I think. And when what's great now is when I teach, I have say 20 or maybe less, but I'll teach kettlebells, and I look really slick doing it, and I can cue someone from there, and I can coach someone here, and but none of it is none of it is really unique thoughts that have come from me. It's just going on courses and someone going, oh, we normally say pack the lats when we do this, or we say, imagine you've got lemons under your armpits, make lemonade, and you just suddenly you after a few years you have all these coaching cues and all these little techniques that then add up to people being like, oh, this guy really knows what he's on about. It's like, no, I'm just a summation of lots of other people, lots of amazing people's knowledge, and you can buy that. Like, it's almost like you want to say that's gold dust and you can't buy that, but actually you can buy that. You just go on a lot of courses, you keep your eyes and ears open, and every time someone says something cool that will work, you go, I'm keeping that, I'm putting that feather in my cap right now, and I'm pass it off as my own.
And the other thing that spending a lot of time on courses and seminars and things like that is the amount of time you're spending around other coaches, where you pick up those cues and things like that. And like you say, you become a summation. But then it's so rewarding when you come up against, but you have a client or something like that with a possibly unique problem, and something you've seen somewhere else or you've been a party to solves that problem. Your worth as a trainer then has grown massively, because there's another problem you can fix. So that's brilliant. I would completely concur. Name one item that you've purchased or acquired relatively inexpensively that has given you a huge return on investment, whether that's something that's hugely benefited your training or nutrition, productivity in business, contentment in relationships, or even just your everyday happiness.
Cool. So I know you said earlier I'm not the kettlebell guy. I thought I've got to say kettlebell. Like, I've just got to. So like there's a famous strength coach called Dan John, and he says, you know, with this kettlebell in my bedroom, I can prepare for the nationals. And I fully believe that. And like we've been speaking about, if you invent something tomorrow and I see the merits of it as more than a kettlebell, then I will take that up. But right now, for me, especially in the time we're in right now, it's everything you need right there. It's as close to everything you need in one thing as you're going to get right now, I think. You know, but you know, barbell, yes, but then you're thinking about loading. You know, you're thinking, do I need a bench? Do I need a rack? Do I need there's suddenly an offshoot of stuff? But a 24 kilo kettlebell, you know, honestly believe that for a male anyway, it just opens up more options than any other thing. And that's why, as a pragmatist, I think that is I have very little at my home, actually. I have two 24 kilos and two 12s, well, girlfriend's 12s, and that's it. But I have, you know, billions of ways I can use that, you know, and I think that's really invaluable.
Right. Yeah. And I think literally because maybe they're because they're they're not new at all, but maybe because the dumbbell is more traditionally seen as the sort of icon of the dumbbell and barbell, the icon of strength, that people kind of can have a knee-jerk reaction and kind of see the thing we've discussed all the way through here is that the kettlebell is just a tool. And I think a lot of people then think that if you're going to say just get a kettlebell, it's because you're a kettlebell guy. But as two people who are actually fairly neutral and, as you say, pragmatic, objectively, it's still a better tool. I think a 24
for me it comes down to, you know, in strong first we have this distinction between the ballistics and the grinds, right? So grinding movements, things like overhead press, you know, they generally happen slower because we're trying to work with closer to maximum weight. A Turkish get up, a squat is a grind, a deadlift would be a grind. But we have the ballistics, and yes, you can do ballistics with dumbbells, but it's just not quite the same. So suddenly when you open yourself up to ballistics, which is sub maximal forces moved at high velocities, that just opens up new opportunities. So the kettlebell swing, the kettlebell snatch, the kettlebell clean, ballistic movements, so high velocity movements. So as what happens there when you're doing the ballistics is it becomes about the velocity rather than the weight. So although dumbbells are amazing, at some point it does become about, I need 2.5 kilos heavier than this now.
Yeah.
Whereas with
a 24 kilo kettlebell, you can still be training with that 10 years down the line, right? Because of that ballistics, because of that force production, you're creating weight from nothing, which is very difficult to do with a dumbbell, right? 100%. I think we're trying to oversell it, but I think anyone that knows, don't they? And it's just such if nothing else, you've got yourself an expensive doorstop. That one, and everyone who's got that expensive doorstop right now is well ahead of everyone else, right? Yeah, exactly.
But that's the thing as well, mate. As soon as the gyms open up again, you know, we'll be on air bikes, we'll be on ski ergs, we'll be on, you know, we'll be in the rack, we'll be in doing our deadlifts or whatever. But like I said, that if we're cutting down to one thing, then for me this is the best thing that comes as a singular thing, you know.
100%. I think I've got an idea of what some of the answers might be for this, but if you could perform only one exercise or movement for the rest of your life, what would it be? And feel free to take liberties here.
So it comes down to two, and I know you'll know one at least. So it comes down to two, and I don't know which, and I'll just make a case for both. So the first one is a burpee. All right, the body weight burpee. I just think, I know it's had bad press, and I agree. You know, I'll listen to either Ben Bruner or the million weird nerds who follow him and then think that like it's an original thought they've had when it isn't, it's his. Like I get it, like I get it, and I get that you can go on the internet and you can find pictures of people doing horrific burpees. But if you go on Jim Fuckery, you can find people doing horrific things with landmines or with barbells or whatever. But for me, this is it's just almost the ultimate movement that this, as a human, how many times must have our ancestors needed to get down onto the floor and get up to the floor? And I spent a very short time in the army, well, the territorial army, 3 years. And anyone who's been in the army knows how often that once you're out in the field, how often you have to get on the floor, get back up, get on the floor, get back up. And the idea for me of saying to people, oh, you shouldn't be doing that, that's dangerous. It's like, and American football exists, but we're saying like learning how to get up and down off the floor and maybe eliciting a bit of a conditioning response from that is dangerous. It's just like nuts. I think, I'm completely biased as well. Two things that make me biased towards a burpee is, one, I'm really short, so I'm really good at them. I'm closer to the ground, right, and it's easier to get back up. And then the other one is, like I said earlier, I classify myself as, an endomorph who's trying to stay lean. So it was always going to be a conditioning movement that I would choose rather than a grind, a strength movement. So that's the first one. And then the other one is the kettlebell snatch. So as Pavel would say, the kettlebell snatch is the czar of kettlebell movement. So it's the king. As I mentioned before, the strong first, doing the snatch test and what that means to getting your certification and how that feels to do, not because it's essentially it's a little bit like a CrossFit WOD. It's like a Fran, you kind of you go up and then you just red line and then you finish or you don't finish. And what that means in the moment to do that in front of your other instructors and how that feels, but also what it means for your grip, what it means for your shoulder strength, what it means for your hips, learning to control an object, move an object at velocity, what that has, the ramifications that has for longevity as well. Pavel's most recent book, The Quick and the Dead, really explores this idea that if you want to kind of stave off old age, you need to be training quick lifts or you need to be training heavy. And the kettlebell snatch is kind of the king of the quick lifts. It has enough technicality to it as well to bring some enjoyment. So it's on that cusp of grunt work and not really grunt work, because it has this technical element to it that I really love. Like I said, that you can always be improving on that. So yeah, I would say either the chest to floor burpee or the kettlebell snatch.
Interesting. I think they're two movements that work literally everything from ground to overhead, right? And I think that's a full range of motion. And that's if there was a movement, not necessarily in an exercise setting, but in all life, if there was a movement I didn't want to lose, it would be the ability to get up off the floor, which is why I cannot understand people I can understand detractors of doing thousands of burpees, but anyone who's in a position to hurt themselves doing thousands of burpees cannot do thousands of burpees. It's just one of the things, right? Where
self-limiting, right? Yeah.
And it's the same as the snatch, right? Exactly the same thing. It's such a, once you've learned to do it properly, although you can kind of grunt your way through more so a dumbbell snatch, but with the kettlebell snatch, any way that you're going to kind of come unstuck and injure yourself, it's very unlikely that someone would have built the work capacity up necessary to do that without also honing the adaptations that are going to protect them. And I think that's what training is, right? And like you say, in a world where American football exists, and as far as I'm concerned, the minute you pick a barbell up and put it over your head, you're in danger, right?
Yeah.
And if you're going to be doing that, then what movement really is dangerous? And it's another one of those things, I think we touched on it before, of it's very easy to hide behind your particular dogmas and methodologies, and I would maybe argue that some of that is going on with the kind of burpee haters.
Yeah.
when you look at the stuff they do,
Yeah.
maybe it's,
Well, I think in these times, like I said, is someone like Ben Bruno. I really rate the stuff he puts up, and
so,
the creativity he has, and the knowledge he has, and but it's like sometimes it's a little bit like, yeah, but not everyone's got a ski erg and a Versa climber in their garage band. Like,
yeah,
like some of us have got to make do with very little, especially right now. And I think where it does get a bit annoying is that people take him out of context. He says that, and it's a bit of a lark to him.
yeah,
Whereas those people then, it's like becomes a bit more of a religion to them, and they become the kind of like they become the enforcers of it, and it's like that's nuts. But what's really important there is if a global pandemic strikes and no one has access to equipment, you can't then just like about face and start posting, the stuff you've been deriding for a long time.
that's 100%. There's a lot of body weight kind of hip bridges to get that conditioning effect, isn't there? Of just getting up off the floor like you did when you got out of bed this morning. No, I think those are two fantastic movements. I think
cool.
There is enough you could do with them potentially to last you a lifetime, right? Especially if you're one of these people who is looking to minimalize it so that you can kind of maximize other areas of your life. You've got two things there that are going to keep you incredibly fit and don't take much thinking, really, do they? You get once you get them right. Luke, this has been fantastic. Thank you very much. Hugely appreciate you coming on. Would you mind telling people where they can find you?
Oh, so my Instagram handle is @Luke So very much appreciate a follow on social on there. Again, any advice you need, just ping us a DM. I do try and work my way through the requests and stuff. But I'll probably just tell you to get simple and sinister and a certain number of kettlebells, but you never know.
Yeah, and I would also say Luke's IG is an absolute gold mine of, if you were just to do a one quick thumb scroll up to get yourself back a month or so and just start working your way through those videos, you're going to have kind of expert coaching and some extremely spicy workouts to work your way through. So the value there is absolutely unparalleled. So Luke Baden, and give that a follow. It's Baden. Okay, mate. Well, thank you very much for coming on today. And
awesome.
I hope a lot of people find their way to you and start implementing this stuff themselves.
Awesome.
Cheers, mate.
Thanks, Andrew. Cheers, fella.
Okay, well, always a pleasure to chat to Luke. Thank you again. I hope you enjoyed that session. I know I took a lot away from it. You can find us on Instagram @ludus.gram, or you can search for Ludus on YouTube. Anywhere you're listening right now, please feel free to like and subscribe. If you follow the links in the description or follow through on social media, you'll be able to find the companion guide for this session to pore over in your own time, with links to many of the things we discussed today, and of course a powerful 30-day kettlebell and bodyweight guide. So until next time, guys, stay physical. I'll see you soon.